Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and kick it off this evening. For those that don't know me, my name is Jeff Wright, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the U.S. Army Ranger Association. We're excited and honored to have Command Sergeant Major Rick Lamb join us this evening. So just a couple housekeeping notes. We're going to do a Q&A after Sergeant Major Lamb's remarks. So feel free to hold your questions until then. And when we get to there, you can either put in the chat the Q&A function or raise your hand. And then we'll just go through some of those functions. So real briefly, Sergeant Major Lamb is the Director of Military Relations for the Global SOF Foundation, has over 40 years of experience in joint combined and interagency special operations. He served in 2 Ranger battalions, 4 special forces groups, and a number of special operations commands. Recipient of the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart, and numerous others awards. And so we are glad and honored to have him join us to share a little bit with us. So Sergeant Major Lamb, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. I'm broadcasting in the clear from the Lutz Patrol Base, and I have you audio and visual, over. And,
Roger,
thanks for that introduction. I appreciate it. I got to be honest, though, I can't take any credit for my street creds. Of everything that I earned were on the backs of guys like you and all the other rugged pipe hitters that I was blessed to serve with. So I can take no credit for it. You know, and basically I was blessed. I had leaders that cared enough to focus my destructive energies to more productive ends. So anybody that actually really knows me well, they understand I could have just as easily wound up in prison. So I was fortunate. And really, I mean, I felt like I was acting most of the time, because when you walk among legends, you just mimic what you see. And so basically, I spent 26 years acting like Corporal Dozier or Sergeant Chandler or Sergeant Mordine and a host of others. So I owe the Ranger formation much. Now, like we were talking earlier, I ran into General Clark, the SOCOM commander, last night. And I don't normally run in his circles, but he came to a veterans benefit in Tampa that I just happened to be at as well. And again, what impressed me is, like any good commander, he brought his senior enlisted advisor with him, and that pretty much impressed me, because they make a great team down here. And so I told him about tonight, and then I asked him if he had any words for the Rangers, and man, his face lit up. So like all of us, he realized that there's no better place to serve than in the Rangers. And then we talked for a while. We both agreed that we owe who we are to the Ranger creed, that disciplined lifestyle, that crucible, and those awesome leaders and soldiers that we were blessed again to serve with. So I know it'll forever be the highlight of my life, and also his too. Now General Clark said that he was proud to be a Ranger, and he was proud of the Rangers past, present, and future. He said during the last 20 years of combat, the Rangers did everything the nation asked them to do, and they did it to a standard that is not matched anywhere else on the planet. And he said they led from the front, they made a difference, they kept the homeland safe, and they kept each other alive. So he says, hold your heads high, Rangers. Now the hard stuff starts. And it kind of piqued my interest. And he said, master the basics. Shoot, move, communicate, and treat your casualties. Let the leadership worry about the distractions that will always come with peacetime. And he said that, he said that like in air quotes. And he said the world is melting down, and the Rangers will be back in combat before you know it. And so he said the nation needs you to be ready. So be who you say you are. Be Rangers. And man, he said it with such force, I locked up and almost knocked out a salute, man. I took that as an order. So, but then the thing is, I'm old enough to remember that we've walked this trail before, man. We have been here before. So we're reliving 1974 all over again. And for those of you that are old enough to remember, Richard Nixon, he ran on getting the U.S. out of Vietnam. So to get the North Vietnamese to the negotiating table, I mean, he went like Curtis LeMay, World War II old school, and he started bombing with B-52s, Hanoi, Haiphong, and all the logistics hubs in Laos and Cambodia. And lo and behold, on 23 January 1973, we achieved victory with the Paris Peace Accords. And on 27 January 1973, it was known as Victory in Vietnam Day. You know, it goes back to victory in Europe, victory in Japan. They had a Victory in Vietnam Day. And you never hear about that anymore. Because in 1974, the new Congress rolls in and they reneged on the peace accords. And the president of South Vietnam said, "Is an American's word reliable these days?" And then you go back and you read that and that just hurts. The North Vietnamese rolled into Saigon in 1975, and South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia fell to the communists. Now, some of the estimates place the death toll between the three nations at close to 5 million, with 250,000 drowning at sea trying to escape. Now, anybody my age or older remembers the Vietnamese boat people. They also remember the Special Forces veterans, you know, who resettled their mountain yard partners in North Carolina. And that's still a thriving community even today. I mean, the picnics that started in the 80s with 400 people, this year, you know, now have 4,000 people. So right about the time all this is going on is when I joined the Iowa National Guard. So in 1976, a year after Saigon fell, I was on a delayed entry program as a 17-year-old high school junior assigned to a recon platoon full of Vietnam vets. So I was really kind of like the mascot among all these Rangers and SF and Marine recon men. And I remember one of my first night patrols, I was in the old ERDL, Vietnam, you know, camouflage uniform. We had the Vietnam era, you know, load carrying equipment and patrol cap. And I was carrying like an XM16E1 rifle. Had with the old 3-pronged flash suppressor on it. And we were conducting our pre-combat checks and all rehearsals, and we were sitting in a GP medium tent. And I remember the patrol leader coming up. He was the platoon sergeant. He just had more experience than the platoon leader, so he was the patrol leader, and the platoon leader, the lieutenant, was the assistant patrol leader. And he stepped up in front of every man and quizzed them about the job that they, you know, what job they had during the patrol, checked their their camouflage, made sure everything was tied down. We did a little bounce test, and then he gave us a sandbag. He gave each man a sandbag. And so we put the sandbags over our head, and for 45 minutes, we sat there back to back, and they went through every step of the, you know, they dropped the flaps on the tents, and we're in there with sandbags over our head. And for 45 minutes, he just quizzed us from, we're going to hit the line of departure at such and such a time. We're going to go out past the, you know, the effective fire of the weapons in the patrol base, and we're going to do our security/listening halt. And it was first azimuth, you know, direction, distance, you know, critical nav points. And he walked us all the way through the line of departure, all the way through actions on enemy contact, actions on the objective, and all the way back. And the reason we were sitting there with sandbags on our head for 45 minutes is because it takes 45 minutes for the rods and cones in your eyes to adjust to the darkness. So these were the days, you know, prior to every man having a set of nods. And really the nods we had were the PVS-5s, and they weren't very good anyway. So I think we had one on point, one on trail, but everybody else was going with natural night vision. So it takes 45 minutes to adjust the rods and cones in your eyes. And we did it 45 minutes prior to EENT. So by the time we hit EENT, we had a 45-minute jump on Charlie, and because our night vision, and that was the Vietnam guys. And they were some of the most switched on soldiers I ever served with. And so it was like nothing like was in the press or in Hollywood. That you know, there was no drug addicted, baby killing, fragging their commanders guys. All that was nonsense. So after about 13 months with the Guard, the platoon sergeant came to me and he said, you need to go do this full time for reals. And so I went on active duty, and he said, you need to go join the new Ranger battalions that were formed, you know, 3 years later. So it's 77 by now, and they'd been formed in 74. And so I went in to see the Adjutant General of the Guard. He chewed my ass for wasting Iowa dollars, but he let me go. I mean, he signed the paperwork, put me on active duty. I went to infantry AIT and jump school. And then I run smack dab into Captain Dave Grange, you know, First Sergeant Jimmy Spencer, First Sergeant Jack Record, Sergeant First Class Steve Murphy, Sergeant First Class Dave Merck, Staff Sergeant Darrell Laws, and a basic load of Vietnam vets who had stood up the 1st Ranger Battalion. And the thing that impressed me, you know, as you look at history in hindsight, is they knew they got a raw deal when the political class, deemed their sacrifice no longer worthy of the monetary cost, and they snatched like a strategic defeat from the jaws of tactical and operational victory, just like today. But they shrugged it off, is what impressed me now. They stepped up. They built the Ranger Regiment. They built 5 active duty special forces groups. I mean, by 1980, I think we were down to 2 groups, and but for the actions of one man, Shy Meyer, they built 5 active duty special forces groups. They also built Delta. They built JSOC. They built SOCOM, and I often credit Colonel Grange, General Grange actually, with birthing the modern day Rangers in 1980. And if I look back at the Eagle Claw, the innovation, the TTP, and the relationships that were established for Eagle Claw, they created missions, skill sets, and training plans that still survive to today. And you fast forward 1993, the TTP developed during Gothic Surf in Somalia. It gave rise to the find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate missions that are used with devastating effect today against Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other violent extremist organizations. So I guess what I'm getting at is that at every critical moment in Ranger history, Rangers have stepped up and stepped into the breach. So I guess my guidance to the Rangers would echo the old man's, hang tough, remember who you are, where you come from, and this is your time. I mean, it may not seem like it now, but you're coming into your time, and you just need to get after it. Now, there is a word of warning here. We, the U.S., we got a bad habit of cutting costs and getting complacent during peacetime. And we also fail to predict the next war, and we tend to fight it with the TTPs and equipment from the last one. So I'd also caution the guys that you've got to understand what's coming up. And skirmishes come in 4 to 5 year intervals. I mean, it's look back at history. Every 5 years, the Rangers are doing something. So it's kind of on the election cycle. Call me crazy, but every 5 years, again, I agree with the old man. You're going to be in combat before you know it. So stay sharp. And bottom line, you got to be ready. Master your basics: shoot, move, communicate, treat casualties, and the world will turn. Now, I also agree that I think that we, the old farts, we've got to be ready too. Organizations like the U.S. Army Ranger Association have to use their platform, and you do, to speak truth to power and hold leaders accountable, so they don't abuse and misuse our Rangers. The lethality and the threats I think that we face today, we can't afford to get complacent, and we can't afford to come into it behind like we always tend to do. And so I mean, we might have to get loud to get that voice, that opinion out there. But I'm ready to do that. Now, we also need to keep an eye on each other and realize that the transition. I mean, in a lot of ways, for the guys that are getting out, the military is a sheltered lifestyle. I mean, you live on base, you've got the security on base, you got the schools on base, you have everything that if flag comes up, flag goes down, people stop in their vehicles, you put your hand over your heart. I mean, everything that you're defending, resides around that base, and then you're told where to be, what uniform. All you have to do is worry about somebody killing you. So, but once you're out into the, there was a book that I think called Tribe from Sebastian Unger. It's about Outpost Restrepo, and he had said that guys would rush across open area under fire to pull a guy to safety that they didn't even like, and so it's that purpose that I think the guys miss. So we've got to. So transition is you're always under transition. It just depends kind of what season of life you're in. So at the foundation, we looked at some of the recent suicides and we kind of deconstructed them, and we found some common themes. There was family, faith, friends, fitness, and finances, and those 5 F's, if you will, they kind of acted as pillars of resilience, lifelines, but they also tended to cascade as you start losing them. And we kind of found that across the suicides that we looked at, that you can lose 2 out of the 5, but if you lose 3 or more, then you're not long for this earth. I mean, you either drink until your liver explodes, or you're going to start a pistol. So, and again, faith can be both religious and secular, in that you see bad things, you do bad things. The first time you see a dead child, you know, you doubt the existence of God, because why would he have not stopped that? Or you either doubt that he could do it, or you just, you know, I don't need him. There's also a secular piece of that, like we're going through right now, where you lose the trust and faith in something bigger than you, like the government. You think that all the institutions have been corrupted. So when you lose that faith in something bigger than you, then you lose that lifeline. You lose that backstop. And most of the guys and gals out there have got some form of post-traumatic stress. And I'll tell you, it does get better with time, but you've got to live long enough to get through it. So the family tends to fall apart under this stress, and so you got to start paying stuff forward. And I can remember laughing with guys who, the Rangers are some of the best planners on the planet. So when you get ready to go take a leave, you say, all right, the bags are going to be packed, they're going to be pushed to the door, we're going to load. By this time, we're going to hit the driveway. By this time, and I want to be, my first critical nap point, getting more gas at this point. And that's not going to happen with your family generally. So you're in an argument by the time you leave the house, and you're looking at every breakdown of a car on the left, or a crowd gathering on the right, and you're a cranky man. And so the family suffers. So your flash to bang is a lot shorter. And so, if you lose your faith and you lose your family, you've got friends to fall back on, but Rangers generally won't volunteer to be the weak link, and they're not supposed to. So friends are only effective if they're reaching out and asking, how's your faith, how's your family, how's your fitness level, how's your finances. They will generally tell you if you ask, and if you've got that relationship, but they're not going to volunteer it. So the fitness, it's both mental and physical, and you're going to break. The body is going to break. And it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy needs, depending on where you're at in your walk, and is where the things become important. So then, there's stuff that you can do for all of this, but you've just got to be able to find it, and again, live long enough to recover from it. So the body, and just know your body's going to break. And then last of all, the finance, the employment with a purpose, as well as the money that you need to keep your lifestyle and or survive. So again, family, faith, friends, fitness, and finances, all important. So right now at the GSF, we're kind of in a search for all those veteran service organizations that cross-cut the pillars of resilience, so that we can kind of cross-level information and then link requirements to solutions. And why is the GSF doing it? We are a national military association along the same lines of the Association of the United States Army, the Navy League. So we're again, we just got National Military Association status this year, and so we are now an advocate for SOF. And so we want to reach across all the components, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and help the guys in transition. And again, we're honored to work shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. Army Ranger Association. And again, we thank you guys for all that you do. With the 3 Rangers of the Gallant Few, the Ranger Outreach Center, and all of the good things that the Rangers are doing, and quite frankly, what Regiment is doing as well with the RAWs and the Human Performance Centers and those types of things. I mean, everything's going good, but we've still got to look hard after the active duty guys and the veterans. Because again, we're to end this, we are in some odd times, and I'm glad to be a part of all this. I'm glad to be at the 6 o'clock position in the perimeter with my BAR, and with that, Ranger, does anybody have any questions for me?
Well, I got a couple for you, something major. Why those that are watching can populate questions in the Q&A or the chat, whichever you prefer. For you personally, what was the hardest part about separating? In your case, retiring, but what was the most difficult part about that transition?
Yeah, the whole, I mean, and it is true. Probably the hardest thing is you don't know what you don't know. So you can go to Big Sarge and say, Big Sarge, what do I need to do? Well, he doesn't know, because he's never been out before. And so a lot of times guys will work right up to the end, and then you step out thinking that you're going to get the job that you thought you were going to have, and it's not there. And so because you work too late to prepare, to be prepared, or you'll think I've always worked, I got to work, and then you'll jump into the first job that you find, and it'll be something that you hate, and then you're stuck there because you got bills to pay. Probably one of the biggest things is again, I mean, because you get out, you got the monster truck, the monster tires, and you're kind of living above your means, because as you come back from the combat zone, you're getting hazardous duty pay and all the other stuff, jump pay. You'll try to rebuild the gun that you had on active duty, and know that costs a lot of money. And then you want to try to feed it, and ammo costs a lot of money. So probably the hardest thing was just the whole transition between the sheltered lifestyle of the military and being out among the English, to where you really don't, you can't. It's hard to read that tribe, and probably and again, it's all that stress on the family by just failing to plan. And one thing, being a sergeant major too, if you say something generally as a senior NCO, I mean, so people are gonna stop talking, they're gonna turn their head, and they're gonna see what you have to say. That doesn't happen out in the civilian world. And usually a sergeant major can, you can raise your voice, you can spit and yell, you can throw things, to get your point across. Because a lot of that's acting, right? A lot of that's going into that persona because the guys dig it. But man, you do that on the outside, and they will baker at you. So that was probably one of the biggest things, was just knowing that not a lot of people want to hear what you have to say until you prove your worth out there in the private sector.
Thanks. Chuck Shepard has a question. He'd be interested to hear your thoughts about the recent rapid withdrawal from Afghanistan, and specifically how to deal with the loss of faith that you spoke about.
On that, it was probably a little easier, because I'm the same way. I mean, a lot of the guys say, yeah, I got 5 years into this, I got 10 years. Well, I got 40 years into this. And so when that first happened, I'm looking back, and I didn't know the 12 years at SOCOM and a couple of years as a contractor over in Korea. I mean, so you buy into the fact that you're protecting the nation. And as you're focused down and you're focused in on what your job is, and you're believing that when the flag flies, man, it stands for freedom. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you go, man, is this the nation I was defending? Did I just waste 40 years of my life? And the answer is no. I mean, because the nation, I think, needs you now more than ever, because we are probably in the fight of our lives right now for what is the soul of the nation going to look like going into the future. And I go back to the Vietnam guys who, and the 70s were, the late 60s, early 70s were crazy. I mean, you had the Baader Meinhof guys, you had the Weather Underground. I mean, there were bombs going off at police stations. There were they were kidnapping generals overseas. They were killing GIs in Germany. I mean, so all the the lefty red commie organizations that were out there, that have kind of resurfaced as of late. They were the late 70s, early 80s was a crazy time, and I mean they butchered the military, and it wasn't until Reagan rolled in and they rebuilt it. So I would say keep the faith. We've been here before. Now is the time to stand up and just make a stand and say no. We're going to rebuild. We're going to retool. We're going to get after it. And there may come a time that America is no longer worth defending, but I don't think it's here yet. I think the Constitution is always worth defending, if that makes sense.
Well said. You mentioned a second ago kind of the progression, and you mentioned Reagan coming in. So that just made me think, with your experience through kind of several eras, starting just after Vietnam and then moving through the 80s, 90s and on, talk about the progression of morale that we had in the Army over that extended time period.
In the big Army, it was the hollow Army of the 70s. Yeah, but I would see that from a distance, and for a time I did serve down in the 24th Infantry Division. So if you go down to the 24th Infantry Division, when I went down there after leaving 1st Ranger Battalion, everything in 1st Ranger Battalion was focused on war, and you would have we had a political commissar. It was our supply sergeant, and he would keep the company abreast of what was going on around the world and what we had to do to get ready to do it. And we'd go out. It was funny. And the best Ranger competition was Charlie Company PT. And Dave Grange we'd show up one morning and we'd have to push start deuce and a halves. We'd have to haul the Jeeps around. We'd have to push the C-130 off the tarmac. We'd run either the 9 or 13 miles around perimeter road in full kit, carrying anything from stretchers to water cans to MREs. Sometimes we'd end at the range, but during that, somebody would get wounded, so you'd have to put an IV in them and then cross level all that equipment. So that was the Rangers, and you're always ready for something. The break glass, send us in. I go to the 24th F Division, not so. I mean, they kept their vehicles clean, but the only reason they kept it clean is because the XO said that he had to eat off the engine compartment. It wasn't because the tank was going to run, because we had to go to the folded gap, because we had to, you know what I mean? They would shoot because I have to get expert in order to get the promotion points I need to make E4. It was just those types of things. We got to do a road march because we had to be ready for the RTEP. So there was no like combat involved. It was just a set piece of check the box stuff, and it probably was not a good time to be in the regular Army at that point. But I was lucky. I spent a little bit of time there. I went to Korea, and again, those relationships that you develop. Sergeant First Class Williams from 1st Ranger Battalion came down and plucked me out of the repo depot, and I ended up going to the Joint Security Area, which was full of a bunch of old Rangers, 82nd dudes, and SF guys that they had cherry picked out of the repo depot and pulled up to that unit. So I think just loss of focus was probably the biggest thing for the rest of the Army.
Very good. Alex Mordine asked, during your time in the Ranger battalions, what was one thing that affected you the most that you carried with you and utilized through the rest of your career? Maybe like a specific instance or lesson or something like that, specifically from a Ranger battalion.
Yeah, I would say the way that Grange treated his people, and they were his people. I got, and Alex knows, I got in trouble in 1st Ranger Battalion, and I probably should have gone to prison. But it was guys like Grange that stepped up and saw something in me and said, no, we're not going to trash this guy. And so I think it was taking care of people. The fact that he was able to look at a problem, sit down, identify it, task, get missions, get a mission, and then task organized to meet that mission. I mean, I kept that with me the whole time, and then also just the ability of watching what a good leader does to take care of his people.
Very good. We know the difference in mission between special forces groups and Rangers and light infantry. What were some of the differences in the cultures or leadership philosophies, leadership styles between the two organizations?
Funny story, right? So I was in, I'd gone to 7th Group and I was in Panama, and then Colonel Grange jumps in with Colonel Keneally. 3rd Ranger Battalion had jumped into the jungle school there. They did the obligatory 12-mile road march up to the cantonment area, and my team, my ODA, was on the tarmac there at Fort Sherman, and we were doing the Fulton extraction system, right? And that's where the big old balloon, and then the C-130 comes along and cuts the wire and pulls the guy into the back. And so Grange came out to see what we were doing, and he said, "When are you coming back to regiment?" And I said, "It's a dead deal. I've been trying for 6 months, but I'm an 18 now, and you guys are 11s." And so he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm on leave right now, PCS leave. And I go up, I report up to Bragg, in a week. And he said, "Stay on leave. I'll meet you there and we'll go see Downey." And General Downey was the USARA commander. I said, "Sir, they will cut my nuts off if I walk into Downey's office." And he said, "Okay, we'll see Potter first." So Potter was a brigadier with SF command. And Downing had wanted to do this program called Crosswalk. And because he saw that when SF branched, because a lot of the guys, and Al Mordino will remember this, a lot of the guys were SF guys. They were just 11 Bravos with the Sierra identifier, and they were serving in the Rangers. So now they're a Victor. And so a lot of the leadership, and at one time that was almost like a chronological progression, because you're able to go to SF, get an infill skill, get an additional specialty skill, like sniper or what have you, and then go back to the Rangers and then back to SF. And that's what that's what General Downing wanted to do with crosswalk, was take Rangers, start them out in the Rangers, send them to SF, and then send them back. And what I liked about it was the Rangers very disciplined, very focused, very proficient. And then when you go to SF, it was additional. I mean, a staff sergeant with a suitcase full of money can do a lot of good things. And so that's what I liked about it, the ability to kind of think out of the box, work outside the box. I loved both elements. There was strength to having a senior group of guys on a 12-man detachment that they could break down into 2 6-man teams and could work by, through, and with indigenous forces. I loved that mission. It was a good mission. But then I also liked going back to the Rangers and being a part of that can of whoop ass that is like found nowhere else on the planet. I can remember going to the last JRX I think I did with third battalion, and I was able to look at I think it was for Haiti, right? It was the forced entry option for Haiti, and I remember it's getting late in the afternoon, the lights are going down, and then the airfield comes alive, and you see the PJs come up, you see the combat controllers come up, you see the jump clearing team coming up, they're rigging, they're getting on, they're putting all the stuff on the aircraft, and I flashed for a minute, like, man, the difference between Eagle Claw and between that first mission into Haiti, the forced entry one, with Restore Democracy, and that was any place on planet Earth for as long as we care to hold it, and they've done nothing but just get better since then. So yeah, it was a good ride, but I liked both. I liked what both brought.
Were you involved in Eagle Claw?
I was, yeah.
To what capacity, and how did that affect you?
I was a young corporal, and I think I started out as a sniper, and ended up for the initial mission. But by the end of it, I think I was a machine gunner out on a battle position, a blocking position, holding down part of an part of an airfield. But yeah, it was the neat thing about well, again, what impressed me about Dave Grange again was that when he got the mission, he brought the whole company into the orderly room, or not the orderly room, but the day room. It had a pool table in it and a foosball table, and it was where guys used to hang out, and, back in the day. So he brings the whole company into the day room, and he asks who are the snipers, who are the best snipers, who are the best machine gunners, who drive Jeeps, off road, who owns motorcycles, both on and off road, and who grew up on farms and have a mechanical background that can keep stuff running with bubble gum and baling wire. And that's how he organized the company, because he knew that we're going to have Jeeps, we're going to have motorcycles. So I think 4 Jeeps show up. They were just old vehicles that were fixing to go down to the boneyard, and we had our own mechanics that the kids from the farm that put those things back together. And then we just figured out, not knowing anything about center of balance or center load, we had to figure out how many Rangers could we get on them, how could we mount machine guns on them, how do we get, there was no infrared light covers, and just the innovation that took place. I mean, there was no dumb idea. I mean, a private could say, hey man, I think we need to do it this way, and if it made sense, that's what they did. And so the biggest thing was just, what impressed me the most was just the way the company came together, how they were able to see the mission, task organized for it, and then everything had to be done from scratch. I mean, from load plans to time warnings, to how do you get on the aircraft, how do you get off the aircraft, when you break the chains, how are we going to account for that was the biggest scare, is that we're going to leave somebody on the ground and fly away and never see him again. So they had golf clickers because the technology wasn't there. The radios weren't there. Every man did not have a radio on him. And so that was I think the thing that impressed me the most was just being able to put that thing together and really become the best in the world at what we did at that particular moment in time.
Well, I just have one last question, and if anybody else has anything, go ahead and put it in the chat in the Q&A while I ask this. But a little bit ago, you mentioned, kind of when you're a sergeant major, everyone listens to you and that sort of thing, and then when you're not, it's a little bit different. So specifically compare and contrast the leadership experience in the civilian world. I know you're involved in kind of the veteran service world, but that's still the civilian side of the house. So just talk about some of the leadership differences and what you've had to do to adjust to that.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of understand the audience. Like one time I had it explained to me that some people learn better by drawing pictures, some through through verbal. The PowerPoint a lot of times puts people to sleep. So again, if you're going, depending on who you're talking to, and the audience that you're talking to, like if you're talking to the State Department, they want a one pager with some bullet comments on it, but they don't want to do PowerPoint. PowerPoint bores them. So that was probably the hardest thing was, understanding, doing your research up front so that you understand who you're talking to, what you're presenting, and then how they receive and process that information. And just know your audience, and then know how to communicate with them. Because a lot of times our communication skills don't adapt to the civilian, and know what you're talking about. I mean, one of the things that I think where Rangers do really, really well, if I go all the way back to the first, my first day in Charlie Company, I run into Corporal Dozier, and Dozier looks at me and he goes, you're a rifleman in Charlie Company, 1st Squad, 3rd Platoon. And he said, I am your fire team leader, and my motto is follow me and do as I do. So right during that initial introduction, he told me, who I was, what my job was, and that all I need to do is be smart enough to follow him, right? And he hands me like 3 books. He hands me my M16, the little blue thing, and he said, I want you to know every pin, every spring. I want you to be able to do this stuff blindfolded. You need to be an expert with this rifle. And he said, you got 40 men in this platoon that are counting on you to be the best with this rifle. And then he hands me, like, I was thinking, the 7-8, the infantry platoon and squad. And he goes, this is what we do. This is who we are. We're the best light infantry on the planet. Then he hands me the Ranger handbook, and he says, we are Rangers. And so he gave me what I needed. But I guess what I'm getting at is the proficiency that young man showed. And there was only like 2 years difference in us. But it was 2 years in the Ranger Battalion versus my 13 months in the Iowa Guard, and so I think especially for the guys getting out, know your audience, know how they communicate, how you can communicate with them, be a little more patient than you do, and study. I mean, if you're going to run into it, you're going to have a shelf life at about 10 years. So if you're not reinventing yourself and reinvigorating yourself every decade, and then it's probably less than that now because of the way technology is just booming. And but your network will atrophy. The things that you know and that you did that were common will atrophy at that 10-year mark, and then you're just the old dude in the back that says how things used to be. So you've got to kind of continue to reinvent yourself, continue to learn, and just communicate. It's all about communication.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I know I, for one, have really enjoyed. I love hearing kind of stories of those days and early in what we consider kind of the special operations as it's organized now, and kind of those early days. So just plenty of wisdom. Can't thank you enough for taking the time, Sergeant Major, and sharing with us. I think you poured into our Rangers that are watching tonight and that will watch the replay, and we're grateful for that. So thank you.
Easy day. Thank you.
Yep.
Stay in touch.
Yep, roger that. A couple follow-up items just for the group. So our next Distinguished Speaker Series event will be January 14th. We're going to have Gary Hinneman, who is an author and Vietnam era Ranger. He'll be speaking with us then. Again, that's Friday, January 14th, 2022. And then last thing worth mentioning is the Bo Baker Ranger Base could use a little bit of volunteer work. So if there's anybody out there interested in helping with that, please reach out. Thank you everyone for viewing. And once again, Sergeant Major Lamb, thank you. And Rangers lead the way.
Thank you, sir.